Just give me a second here. Hold on. Let's just go ahead and share this on Facebook real quick. Um, let's put it in the Facebook chat group. Okay, there we go. All right, just a few more seconds. All right. Sorry about that, y'all. Hey, what's good, everybody? So today, while I'm on lunch break, obviously for an hour, um, I wanted to share something with y'all. First off, how y'all doing? I hope you guys enjoyed last night. Um, I went to basically be a part of a African American celebration at University Prep. It's one of the schools that I work in, and I was there with my mentor yesterday, Brother Malcolm Cape Thomas. Who's had a deep influence on my life, and that's all I'll say. Anyway, I was walking through my kitchen today, kind of pacing back and forth a little bit, and I had some thoughts on Matthew chapter 5 that I would like to share on my lunch break. And I hope that this becomes abundantly clear. The only reason why I'm just sharing it right now instead of making a PowerPoint and things like that, which I normally do, is because I kind of want y'all to for once just kind of, how can I explain this? Usually I just care about the information. You know what I mean? But I think it is important at some level, eventually, for people to kind of get to know you, you know what I mean, with information. You know what I mean? I want people to see God in, what I do with my PowerPoints. But, I want people to see God in me as well. Just as many ways that people can see God in the work that I do. That's it. And I think at some level, you gotta at least start talking to people face to face, like Jesus did. Yeah, I mean, so I just wanted to clear that up. And on top of all that, it's a lot easier to just go ahead and make a video and teach, all right? Instead of just, working hard, making a PowerPoint. After a while, it's kind of like God's like, nah, I dropped that in you. Just give it, So that's the reason why I'm just trying to do something a little different. Anyway, peace Ishay, peace Trennis, peace to everybody else I didn't see quite yet. So let me go ahead and get into this. Matthew chapter 5. I got this pasted on my wall here because I can't use my phone. It simply says this, Matthew 5 ESV. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. Okay, so notice one thing here. I kind of thought about this. Now, this is Matthew writing about this. He knows a lot about, the Jewish background. He's writing to the Jews. Who do you know end up going up on a mountain in the Old Testament? That's right, Moses, exactly. So here he is. Matthew just happens to write Jesus seeing the crowds. He went up on a mountain, sat down, and his disciples were there. Now, it's funny because I do believe that I think there were some people that went up on a mountain with Moses, but of course they didn't go all the way up. I could be wrong about that. I just remember it saying something about how Moses ate and drank with God. Then after that, it says this. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying. Now, let me think about that real quick. Now, Matthew didn't have to write that. Why did he have to write down, he opened his mouth? Where in the New Testament have you guys heard that from Jesus when he's talking about the mouth? Where? Here, let me give you a hint. 40 days in the wilderness. Fasting. Temptation by the devil. turn this stone into bread. What did Jesus say? What did he say? That's right. He said, man shall not live by what? Bread alone, by what? But every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. Okay, exactly. And so Matthew just happens to write down, and he opened his mouth and taught them. Oh, now something else. So now Jesus is teaching. Saying. I looked up that word saying. You know, the third possible definition in there is commanding. And if you look at the context of everything that he's teaching, it is in the form of a command. But you could just say saying. But I just wanted to point that out as we're going. So now all of a sudden, you know, living by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God, and you have Jesus opening his mouth and teaching, right? Also, so that puts a lot more weight on Christ's commandments. You ever notice that? Jesus keeps on saying, you know what? If you would have believed Moses, you would have believed me too. So now Jesus is like, you know, he's always putting himself on par with Moses. I mean, look at it. Moses was a big deal. Have you read John 9? John 9, where the Pharisees and the scribes and all the believing Jews, they end up saying, well, you know, we're disciples of Moses. So Jesus was always doing that. Hey, if you would have listened to Moses, you would have listened to me too. What? His commandments. So that's another context of looking at verse 2 when he says he opened his mouth and taught them saying, right? Because Jesus did teach his own commandments. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So let's go ahead with that context. Let's go ahead and get into it. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Not just Israel. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. That's a big deal. Yeah, I bet that get everybody's attention as the people were listening. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I want you to pretend that you're in a crowd, you're a Jew, you're listening to this stuff, and you're like, wow, this is some stuff I ain't never heard before. But this brother's preaching. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account, for my name's sake. Oh, now that's totally radical. Now, whatever Jesus is teaching, this ain't something that you can find in the Old Testament. I don't remember in the Old Testament where it was said, hey, you know what? Blessed are you when people persecute you and do all this stuff on Jesus' account. No, Jesus did not manifest himself in the flesh in the Old Testament. So this is some radically new stuff here. This is what they're hearing. I'm trying to put you in the mindset of a Jew that's listening to this stuff while he's on a mountain speaking. He says, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And we all know who they were. Then after that, he says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt had lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown down and trampled out under man's feet. Wasn't the devil trampled underfoot like multiple times? You know, I mean, it speaks about that in the New Testament, doesn't it? I mean, isn't the Savior supposed to crush the head of the serpent, and he's supposed to harm his heel, right? He dies for 3 days later, comes back. It's all there. I'm just trying to get y'all to think. You know, I think Michael Heiser was right when he said, if you read the Bible like science fiction, even though you know it's not, you'll start to see this little unavoidable, significant stuff that just pops out in scripture. You'll think to yourself like, okay, them brothers didn't put that in there for no reason. Just trying to get y'all to think. All right, let me continue. You are the light of the world. Oh, wow, okay. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. You are a light, you are a city. Kind of sounds like a group of people. Let's continue. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. Okay, so this light actually, stands on something. That's interesting. It's on a stand. And it gives light to all in the house. The same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Now, so far, he gave us a whole laundry list of some interesting commandments through teaching, right? I want you to pay attention to this next part. Listen to this. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, as Jesus is teaching, he does a pit stop, and he does something interesting. This is what he says next. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill them. So Jesus has come to fulfill the law and the prophets. But listen, why in the world, in all the midst of his teaching, would he simply just stop and say that? I'm going to ask that question again. Jesus is teaching and teaching, right? You can read all this stuff, blessed are you, blessed are you. And I think it's interesting that compared to Deuteronomy 28:68, you had curses and you had blessings. With Jesus, you got these blessings that are based on the conditions of what you go through in him. You're blessed. I guess that's why the New Testament, writers, they end up saying that the new covenant is based on better promises. Matthew 5, Deuteronomy 28. Like I said, I could be wrong though. I could be wrong. Just trying to get y'all to think. Why do I ask this question? Why would Jesus end up saying, hold on, y'all, don't think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've came to fulfill them. Why would he say that? What is he doing that's causing him to say that? What is he doing that's causing him to think that the crowd may think that? What is he doing? Well, all the other verses before show him giving commandments and teachings. It must be something that he's teaching. If it's something that he's teaching that's causing him to say, stop, right? Sounds as though he didn't want anyone to think. Right, okay, so Trennis, who is, a quote-unquote Israelite, he says, well, Matt, it sounds like he didn't want them to think that he came to abolish the law. That's right, Trennis. So, what is Jesus doing that would cause him to think that they're thinking that? Well, the only thing that he's doing so far is that he's teaching them, right? And the context and the nature of his teachings are in commandments. Commands. Blessed are you when this happens. Blessed are you when that happens, right? You are the light of the world. Commandments. So obviously, the things that Jesus is teaching, he may have them thinking, let me rewind. Yeah, Jesus knew their thoughts. Obviously, whatever is in the law and the prophets, they're seeing as different from whatever Jesus is teaching. Why is that? Because whatever Jesus is teaching, last time they checked, you didn't find all that in the old covenant. Now, Trennis just said, Matt, that's an assertion. Okay, if it's an assertion, then which one makes more sense? Let's pretend for a second that, that Jesus is just teaching the law. Well, those things right there, can you find those as commandments in the old covenant? No. Perhaps the best that you could do is you could find things that kind of like, allude to it a little bit, maybe in a psalm somewhere, maybe a nice little proverb. But what about somewhere in like Deuteronomy, first 5 books? Thus saith the Lord. Oh well, we can't find that. Yeah. So does that assertion even work in the context of whatever Jesus is teaching? No. Else, why would he be saying, well, guys, don't think that I've come to destroy the law and the prophets? He's saying that based on something that he's teaching. That context shows that whatever Jesus is teaching, it is distinct from the old covenant. Now, here's the thing. According to Jesus, he says that, yes, okay, I want y'all to know that I'm about to fulfill this stuff. So even though Jesus' stuff is distinct from the old covenant, it doesn't mean it does away with the law. It means it fulfills it. How so? Let's go ahead and continue to find out how so. I just wanted to put that there. Let's go ahead and continue. So we got Jesus teaching. He does all this teaching. He does a pit stop and says, hey, I don't want y'all to think I'm getting rid of anything. I'm fulfilling it. That context shows the nature of his teachings, that it automatically makes it distinct from the old covenant. But just because it's distinct doesn't mean that it throws the old covenant or abolishes the law. No, it fulfills it. He's about to show you how. Check this out. He says this, I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly, I say to you, there he is again. Truly, I say to you, not Moses, Jesus is saying that. He said, until heaven and earth pass away, not one iota, not one dot will pass away from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, now let's pause right there. I'm going to say it again. Therefore, in other words, because of, based on what? So his therefore is the whole context of what he's about to say next. Because what? Because what? Because I have not come to destroy the law. Because I've come to fulfill the law. Because the law is not going to pass away until all is accomplished. Because until heaven and earth is passed away, not one iota will pass in the law until all is accomplished. Because I've come to fulfill the law, right? Because of all this stuff, what does he say next? He said, because, or therefore, whosoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Well, Matt, he just said these commandments. That must be talking about the old covenant, law of Moses. If it is, then all of a sudden it begs the question, like, well, why did Jesus end up saying, whoa, wait a minute, y'all. Don't think I've come to, like, do away with the law. Like, if he was talking about the commandments the whole time, what is he worried about that's making his teachings distinct from the commandment? Like, why is he worried? It doesn't make any sense if you're going to say these commandments are the law. It don't make sense. Here's another way. He said the least of these commandments. He didn't say the commandments, right? Y'all like to go ahead and cut off the S and the E to the these, and it just says the commandments. Well, once again, there's a problem. It says these commandments. So I know what you're thinking. Well, Matt, if it's not talking about the commandments in the law that ain't going to be done away with, then what commandments is it going to be talking about? The commandments that he was just teaching through the first 16 verses that he said will fulfill the law, his own commandments. That's why he said these commandments, not the commandments. Look at what he did. Look at verse 2. And he opened his mouth and taught them. saying, commanding. Go back to verse 19. Therefore, whoever relaxes the least of these commandments and teaches them to do so. Oh, so you got commandment and you got teaching. Go back to verse 2. You got him open up his mouth, right? Authority of God. Taught the teaching, right? Saying, commanding. These commandments. It only makes sense like that. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and go through this one more time before I move on. I'm going to say it again in case y'all didn't catch it. Jesus is saying, therefore, based on like everything that he said before, based on the fact that I ain't come to destroy the law of the prophets, based on the fact I've come to fulfill them, right? All that stuff. Therefore, whosoever relaxes the least of the commandments, what, the least of the law, will be least in the kingdom of heaven. If he was just talking about the law, then why does he have to say, look, don't think that I came to abolish the law? It doesn't make sense. He shouldn't have the concern if he was talking about the commandments all along. All right, let's go back to my context. Based on everything he's saying. Therefore, whosoever relaxes the least of these commandments, in other words, the things that Jesus is commanding and teaching, right? That's what he's talking about. They're going to be least in the kingdom of heaven. He's talking about his own teachings. Why? Because through the verse 16 verses, he was talking about his own teachings. To the point where he kind of got a little concerned and ended up saying, look, y'all, I don't want y'all to think that because of what I'm teaching, I'm, trying to destroy the law. No, I'm going to show you that my teaching fulfills the law, so y'all ain't got nothing to worry about. I know it's distinct. I know it's something y'all ain't heard of before, but it's cool. Therefore, whoever relaxes the least of these commandments, once again, he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, oh, the least of these commandments, and teaches others to do so. If you can't look at verse 2 and see a direct correlation with verse 19, I don't know what to tell you. I just don't. But then again, I could be wrong. But I mean, it just makes sense, man. Like, this is narrative. So let me go ahead and continue. Teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Once again, where can you find that kind of teaching in the old covenant? You can't find that command in the old covenant. This is Jesus' teaching. He's laying down new commandments. You can't find that. That is another reason why he's talking about these commandments. What are the these? Blessed are you, blessed are you. What are also the these? The these are the stuff that's going to come after. Just like he said, hey, you know what? If y'all relax anything that I tell you, then you're going to be called least in the kingdom of heaven. So let's go ahead and continue. Let's find out some other stuff that he's teaching now. Verse 20, he picks up right where he left off in verse 16. He just continues to teach all this stuff. Verse 20, this is what it says. For I tell you, once again, there he is, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I ain't never seen that in the Old Testament. Scribes are in the Old Testament, but not Pharisees. They're new on the scene, So obviously, that is a commandment from Jesus. What were the Pharisees and scribes doing for righteousness? They were keeping the law. Exactly. How is your righteousness going to exceed theirs in order to get to the kingdom of heaven? Well, you want to go ahead and do the law? I guess what? You can do the law better than them, I guess. Or you can actually have a righteousness that does not come from the law. You can have a righteousness that comes from Jesus. And that righteousness, I definitely know, exceeds that of the Pharisees and scribes. Just like his apostles end up teaching. Righteousness apart from the law, but was witness to it. I mean, I don't know how much more plainer to teach that. You're sitting there, you're a Jew, and someone comes up to tell you, say, all right, unless your righteousness is better than those people over there who are keeping the law to a T, you ain't getting to heaven. So what you gonna do? You're gonna go and try to keep the law like them a little better, or you're gonna go ahead over here and see what the apostles are teaching, because they taught things from Jesus. They're teaching there's this righteousness that you can have that, is apart from what those guys are getting it from over there. And they say it comes from Jesus. It comes from salvation. And we know that anything that Jesus gives is better than whatever it is that those guys are chasing after. It's a new covenant. The righteousness apart from the law. The righteousness that exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees. Alright, with that being said, let's move on more. He says this: you have heard it said of those of old. Once again, talking about the old covenant. You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. Right? That's the Old Testament command, right? Thou shalt not kill. You know what I'm saying? Right? Okay, that's cool. That's nice. Then he says, but I say to you. Once again, Jesus keep doing that, don't he? The Old Testament says this, but I say this. Moses said this, but I say this. If you would have listened to Moses, you would have listened to me too. See, I got commands too, but y'all ain't listening to me because y'all don't believe, blah, blah. Do you see that? Am I the only person that's like not catching that? Let's see what he says. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says you fool will be liable to hellfire. So, I mean, that's a lot more extreme. So you got Jesus saying, look, all right, it said that, you're not supposed to murder. But if you do these things, you're going to be liable to judgment, to the council, and hellfire. So in other words, if you don't hate your brother in your heart, you're not going to be liable to go ahead and have to face judgment, council, hellfire. So that means if you don't hate your brother in your heart, you're probably not going to kill him either. I'm going to say this again. If you don't hate your brother in your heart, to where Jesus says it'll get you 3 kind of things, hellfire, council, and all this other stuff, then you're definitely not going to kill your brother, which in the Old Testament, you just get liable to judgment. This is the reason why the commandments of Jesus fulfill the law and the prophets. You see that? If I ain't got to worry about my brother in my heart, I ain't got to worry about the knife in my hand to kill him. That's the reason why the new fulfills the old. This is the reason why he said, I did not come to destroy, I came to fulfill. His teachings actually fulfill the old covenant without you having to do it. So look, I ain't got to worry about not murdering somebody. If I ain't got the intent in my heart, I ain't got to worry about the temptation of breaking that law. Why? Because I'm trying to keep the law of Christ. Let's go ahead and move on. He says this. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift at the altar before you go. First be reconciled with your brother, then come on and offer your gift. Right? Come to terms quickly with your accuser while he's in, while they're while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put into prison. Truly I say to you, you will never go out until you have paid the last penny. Okay, so from here, Jesus is I know the latter part, but the earlier part. Now the earlier part, that is just talking about, all right, God does not just want an external offering. No, he wants you to, be all right with your neighbor, and also to offer him an offering, right? These are the things that he's teaching the Jews who were still under the old covenant at the time, right? Now the other part is this. He says, listen, agree with your accuser, or in other words, he said, come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going to court. What happens if you come to terms with somebody while you're on your way to court? Well, if you come to terms with them, is there any more reason to go over to the judge and to the guard and to go into prison? Nah. Why? Because y'all came to terms. In other words, he was telling you, before you even get to the judge, before you even get to the guard, before you even get to the prison and all that other stuff, if you want to go ahead and avoid all that, then try your best to go ahead and come to terms quickly with your accuser. If you don't, then all of a sudden that's going to happen to you. But hey, if you go ahead and come to terms, you ain't got to worry about all that. What did he end up saying about it? What did Jesus say? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Right? Alright. Let me go on. Now, do you see that's like the second time that, Jesus' teachings are a little bit like preventative? You notice that's a pattern? Anyway, let me go ahead and continue. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Okay, that's an old covenant commandment, right? Don't commit adultery. We know how adultery is committed. You got a wife, you see someone who's not your wife, and you go ahead and have relations with that person. That's committing adultery. Old Testament says you shouldn't do that. Let's continue to read. But I say to you, okay, once again, there Jesus again, he giving his own commandments. But I say to you, that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So in other words, the Old Testament teaches don't commit adultery. Jesus teaches don't even lust in your heart or you'll commit adultery in your heart. There's nowhere in the Old Covenant that teaches don't commit adultery in your heart. The best you can find is like little wisdom passages that says, I've made covenant with my eyes. And I mean, you'll find things like that. And that's good. That's nice. But I keep on going back to it. Where does it say, thus saith the Lord? Deuteronomy, Leviticus, like first 5 books. Like, where does it say, hey, bruh, if you lust about that woman in your heart, you commit adultery in your heart. You have committed the sin of adultery in your heart. Where is that? You can't find it. Let's go back to Jesus. If I end up doing what Jesus says, which is don't commit adultery in your heart. Don't lust after that person. If I end up doing that, do I have to worry about physically committing adultery? Nope. Why? Because that ain't in my heart. So it's not even tempting me. It's not even grinding my gears. It ain't doing none of that. So I definitely ain't got to worry about doing it in the physical. Why? Because I'm making sure I'm not lusting in my heart after that woman and not committing adultery in my heart. If I don't commit adultery in my heart, new covenant, I definitely ain't going to commit adultery, old covenant, the real actual way. Definitely ain't going to do that. So in other words, this is the reason why the teachings of Jesus fulfill the law. He said, I didn't come to destroy the law. I came to fulfill it. How is he showing that he's doing this? Through his teachings. You have heard it said of old. But I say to you, you've heard it said of old. But I say to you, you've heard it said of old. But I say to you, like, look, I don't know how much more plain to put it. Like, Jesus is doing what he said he was teaching. Let me go ahead and continue on. He says, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away, for it is better that you lose one of your members than that the whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away, for it is better that you lose one of your members than that of the whole body go into hell. Once again, that's a commandment. And I don't remember that being in the old covenant anywhere. I don't remember that kind of teaching. Let's go on. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. We all know that divorce was written in the old covenant, right? It's part of the old covenant. And therefore people did it, right? Okay. So in other words, you can go ahead and divorce somebody. You want to write a certificate of divorce, you go ahead and do that. Now, obviously, that person might remarry. But then Jesus says something. Let's see what Jesus says. But I say to you, once again, it seems like a pattern, don't it? That everyone who looks at, he said, but I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. That's interesting. I don't remember finding that anywhere in the Old Testament. Do you? No, I don't. I don't remember that being as a penalty in the wrong. I don't remember that. I thought the only way that you commit adultery is, hey, you know what? You're having sex with someone who is not your wife. I thought that was the only way. Nah, not with Jesus. Nope. He's saying, look, if you divorce and that woman go ahead and be with somebody else, then all of a sudden she commits adultery. And whoever goes ahead and marry with her, and you still alive, brother, you still alive, then, they commit adultery too. Now, that's an extended version. So if you don't want to commit adultery the way Jesus is talking about, not the way the Old Testament is talking about, then what do? According to Jesus, you say marry. Now, of course, the only way that you could rightfully divorce and not have to worry about that whole adultery thing is if that person ends up, being immoral in the marriage. Now all of a sudden you cut them off and you're good. There's a second way too, and it's in Romans 7. It talks about if the husband dies, then you're free to marry another. Now, of course, Paul compared that to the law. He said the law was your husband, the husband died, now you're free to marry another, and that other is Christ. So that means if I don't want to go ahead and, worry about committing adultery in a way where, that I'm divorced or something like that, then I have to go ahead and be back with my wife. Why is this important? I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you why. Back in the day, I guess it was just, maybe it was a lot easier to just go ahead and just divorce women just like that. And, you go ahead and go with somebody else. I don't like the way you cook today, so therefore I'm going to go ahead and divorce you. I'm going to go with somebody else. Jesus didn't like that. So he said, nah, under my commandments, if y'all going to be together faithfully. Don't matter if, you want to write a certificate of divorce. Nah, you got to do something real drastic in order for that to go away. Jesus wanted them to sit together. Just like God is stuck with the Israelites as a marriage covenant. Right? Israel did some crazy stuff. And, he could have just wrote a certificate of divorce just like that. Nope, he done suffered long with it. To the point where they really just went crazy and God was like, all right, you know what? He wants y'all to be together. The new covenant, Jesus' teachings challenge you more. You notice that? I'm just saying. How could they not? All right, let me go ahead and continue. He says this. He said, again, you have heard it was said of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. He said, but I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, because, well, that's God's throne, or by earth, because that's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, well, because that's the city of the great king, which is Jesus himself. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one of your hairs white or black. Let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Now, I'm going to let y'all know right now, I have no clue what that means. I don't. All I know is it's distinct. It's very distinct from, the way that they did things in the old covenant. Maybe I'll study that a little bit more and I'll find out. You know what I mean? But for right now, I just say, look, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Now, from what I'm picking up from it instantly is, you know what? If you're going to do something, you make sure that you do it because you said it. Not because you're swearing by heaven, you're swearing by this, you're swearing by that. Nah, man, go ahead and be light. You go ahead and just do it. Don't drag nobody else into it. Now, like I said, I could be wrong about how that goes down. Let's go ahead and continue on. Now that we're basically at the end of this. Listen, man. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? I do believe that's in the old covenant. I think that's in Moses, right? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, okay, once again, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who will borrow from you. That's hard to do, because last time I checked, our mom taught us one thing. If they hit you, that's right, hit them back. An eye for an eye, right? Jesus said, no, you ain't gonna do that no more. You know what I mean? Somebody wronged you, right? You want to get them back, right? That's what you want to do, don't you? Matter of fact, the law says that you gotta do that, huh? That's not what Jesus said. Whatever the law is saying you can do, Jesus ain't painting a picture of saying that you could do it under his commandments, under his new covenant. He said, nah, bruh, if you're gonna be with me, it ain't gonna be like that. If somebody takes your tunic, it ain't gonna be no eye for an eye. I'm gonna take that. No, just let them have it. If someone, forces you to walk 1 mile, you're gonna do eye for an eye. I'm gonna go ahead and walk. You gonna walk my mile? No, man. Walk 1 and 2 miles. That's not an eye for an eye. Jesus is not an eye for an eye. It's a little bit harder to go ahead and keep the new covenant, isn't it? See, you can do all these external things, right? Go ahead, come to feast day, things like that. But it's hard to do like a lot of moral stuff that be costing you. How do I know this? I could pull up 18 passages of scripture right now from the old covenant where God is complaining through the prophets and how the prophets are complaining about Israel, about not keeping a bunch of moral stuff. But guess what they are keeping? The solemn feasts. and the feast days and the Sabbaths and the new moons. But they weren't keeping, hey, you know what? Do right by your neighbor. Make sure you do justly to the fatherless and the widow, and look out for your neighbor. They weren't doing that. They were scheming and doing all the other stuff. By logic, it seems a lot easier to do the external things. Sabbath, don't work. Feast days, supposed to do this here. That seems a lot easier. When it comes to the moral law, and the way that Jesus is strengthening it, it's hard to be like, hey man, this person just took my coat, I'm gonna let him have it. Dang, that's hard. And so a lot of the moral stuff to do, man, that's hard because it be costing you sometimes. Looking out for the poor and the widow. Well, I want to look out for myself. I got me and my four and no more. And, because if I look out for the fatherless and the widow, like God complained that the Israelites were not doing in the old covenant, that's going to cost me. Dang, I gotta give us some extra money for the fatherless and widow. Let me see if I spend some time with them over here. I got my own family, but I can spend some time. It's gonna cost you, bruh. Am I making this up? If it's gonna cost you, don't that mean it's a lot harder to do after a while, man? It be taxing on you. I don't know how much, more I could put it. The external stuff, like keeping the new moons and the feast days and things like that, it don't seem like it costs you, do it? It seems like something that you're just supposed to do, right? Go ahead and do that. That's the reason why they were doing that to a T in the old covenant, but yet when it came to the moral law, they weren't doing that, were they? That's why God and the prophets complained about it. So let's go back here. He said this: you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, I don't know if that's in the old covenant or not. I don't know. I think it is. Because I remember I was reading some of these passages and I didn't see some of this stuff in the old covenant. But I think it is, right? But either way, whatever it's talking about, it's saying, hey, you love your neighbor and you hate your enemy. Now, of course, Israel had a lot of enemies. They had a lot of enemies, okay? He said, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, a lot of people can say, you know what, Matt? It does say in Leviticus that we are supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. It does say that, doesn't it? What about your enemies? Now, at the same time, you can say, well, Matt, aren't our enemies our neighbors also? Well, yeah, technically, but why is it distinct from there? Because usually your neighbors are what? People that are around you in Jerusalem. Hey, what's up, bro? How you doing? Your enemies, usually they don't live close to you. It's not how it rolls. Usually your enemies are, over there somewhere. Your neighbors, enemies. Just making perfect sense. Let's see here. He said this: I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Once again, that's a new commandment. Ain't that hard to do? Ain't it so much easier to just hate your enemies? Ain't it? It's like a gut instinct. It's a lot harder to love your enemies, huh? Yeah. Seems like the moral law is just, that's hard to do, man. This external stuff, yeah, you do that, but that moral stuff, oh, that's going to cost you. That's going to cost you, bro. You don't want to do that. All right, here we go. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. That's the second time he said sons. Did y'all notice that? You know, the first time he said sons was, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be the sons of God, become the sons of God. Now he's saying, if you love your enemies, you will end up being sons of your Father who's in heaven. Now, last time I checked, if you can end up loving your enemies, you stand a really good chance at being a peacemaker, huh? And that's what makes you a son of God. Well, last time we checked, in the old covenant, what made you a son of God is, you know, you were circumcised, you came under the law of Moses, things like that. Now you're a child of God. New covenant? Something a little different makes you that. You see how plain this is? I'm trying to come straight down your alley. This has always been there. I'm not doing nothing new, bruh. Let me go ahead and continue because we're at the bitter end now. I said I keep this under an hour. We're at 51 minutes and 9 seconds. Good. It says this. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. Okay. And sends the rain on the just and the unjust. So in other words, your God in heaven, the Father above, ends up treating everybody the same. He give everybody what they need, whether they are neighbor or whether they're enemy, whether they're his sons or whether they're not, whether they're his sons and daughters or whether they're a hater. God treats them both the same. He give them rain, be they good or bad. So why can't you go ahead and love your enemy instead of just loving your neighbor and hating your enemy? God treat people both the same. Why you got to be different? Why do you have to have partiality? Be ye holy, for I am holy. Treat people the same because I treat people the same. I cause it to rain on the just and the unjust. So I'm going to go ahead and love my neighbors and my enemies. Bruh. Come on. Alright. Here's the wrap up. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? It's funny because the tax collectors were synonymous with sinners because they were always looked at people who betrayed their own people because they're working for the Romans, getting all the taxes from their own people. They were kind of looked at as traitors, you know what I'm saying? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? So the New Testament people end up treating people like this, then you're obviously treating people differently than how the people under the Old Covenant were, according to the sense of this passage. Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Oh, dang. Wow. Even the Gentiles do that. Even the Gentiles love their neighbors and hate their enemies according to the law. Oh, so they in other words, like, I guess it's equivalent to saying, like, dang, even my 5-year-old could do that. Like, you therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Matthew 5. I hope this made sense for y'all today. Leave a comment, you know what I mean? I don't care if you subscribe or not, you know what I mean? Share the video with any of your friends. The law and the prophets. Jesus said, I have not come to destroy the law, I've come to fulfill. The whole thing is, you can pretend that this purple here is a law, right? And it's supposed to fill in this circle. There it is. Now, Jesus comes along and says, here, I want you to take this, and I want you to take this. Now, this and this is distinct from this. Red is not purple. Blue is not purple. But if I put red and blue together, it's going to make purple. And when I color in red in the circle, and when I color in blue into the circle, what's going to be there? The same color as this. In other words, what Jesus is teaching can achieve the same as this. And based on the scriptures, it can achieve even more. Matter of fact, there is more. You got red and blue. But when you put them together, you're making the same color as the old covenant. That's why he didn't come to destroy it, but to fulfill it. Do you see that? You fulfill the old covenant, not by doing the old covenant, but by doing the commandments of Christ that fulfill the old covenant. Matter of fact, there's stuff in the new covenant that's so radically new that, you you might not want to go ahead and do the old. For example, animal sacrifice. We all know that. That was the whole point. Don't commit adultery. Purple. Don't lust after a woman in your heart and commit adultery in your heart. Red and blue, put them together. It makes purple. If I don't commit adultery in my heart, I definitely ain't got to worry about committing adultery in real life. If I can stop it in my heart, I can stop it from manifesting in real life. Jesus said, out of the heart comes all these evil things, right? Didn't he say gluttony comes from the heart? Isn't gluttony an action? Yeah, it's an action, isn't it? It's something that you do. He said something that you do comes from something that beats the soul. He says it comes from here. If you get this right, if you get rid of the gluttony that might be manifesting here, but has not committed an action yet, you ain't got to worry about it manifesting and committing the action, do you? No, you don't. Bruh. Once again, I still got people saying the Lord said in the beginning, keep it, bruh. But once again, we're talking about covenants, aren't we? Who was he talking to? He was talking to Israel. He wasn't talking to the whole world. Now, in the new covenant, now there's new things to keep. That's why the new is distinct from the old. I don't know what you mean, Trinix. He said it sounds like they're a couple. Well, I guess they are. You know what I mean? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So, I guess I got 2 more minutes of freedom before I get back to work here. But yeah, y'all. Like, we're gonna talk about covenants next. Sounds like you cannot have one without the other. Tell me, y'all, does that make sense? Can you, he says it sounds like you cannot have one without the other. So let's find out. Spoke about the heart. Spoke about gluttony. Spoke about the heart. Spoke about lust. These things are actions. He's talking about where these actions take place before they become actions. He's saying, don't allow these actions to go ahead and manifest from the heart. if you end up making sure that you don't lust in your heart after someone and therefore not commit adultery in your heart, then what? Then you won't have to worry about committing adultery. I mean, I don't. So, in other words, if I do this one right here, I won't have to worry about doing this one right here. Because doing this one right here prevents me from getting even this far to even doing this one over here. It's called prevention, bruh. So you can have one without the other. Matter of fact, I think you're looking at a little lopsided. Really, it's one prevents the other. Lusting in your heart, committing adultery in your heart prevents actually physically manifestation of committing adultery. So you can have one without the other. But yet this man says, sounds like you can't have one without the other. Logically, it don't even make sense, bro. Look how Jesus is teaching. Look how he's talking. So, all right, y'all. It's 1 minute past the time. I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. Maybe we'll talk about a little something else. You know, leave a little something in the comment section, and please, listen. Really starting this year, I'm really looking forward to speaking at other places, even if it's out of state, even if it's for a few days. I want to build with young people. I want to build with pastors. I have plenty of PowerPoints. I have plenty of things that I have not even released to the public yet. This being one of them, obviously. I want to go ahead and teach people the Word of God to the point where it will help them see the difference between, you know, what, you know, Christians believe and what, you know, so-called Hebrews end up believing. I want to show this stuff. I want to help. You know what I mean? Please email me at ssoreal@gmail.com. You can also call me at 412-872-8037. My name is Matthew Solly, a.k.a. So Real. I love y'all. Peace and blessings. Please pray for me, y'all. You know what I mean? Definitely keep me up in your prayers. Please, please. All right, y'all. Peace and blessings.